Hello and welcome everybody back to the channel. I am your host Vortex from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And if you are new to the channel, what we do here is release weekly videos to try to help people learn how to produce music. So if you do want to help us out on that mission, make sure to smash those likes, subscribe, and share out the show. Now today's video is the third part in an ongoing series where we're teaching you the fundamentals of music production using the plugins inside Cubasis 3. And the third video in that series will be today's video where we cover Cubasis's channel strip plugin. Now what a channel strip plugin actually does is simply emulate the channel strips found in those big huge mixing desks or mixing consoles inside professional studios. It's basically a group of plugins all combined together under one roof. And over time you'll find that most of the pros do use these channel strip plugins in their day-to-day productions. And that's because they usually can hear exactly what needs to be done to a sound right away and all at once, as opposed to modifying the sound in many different steps using a bunch of different EQs and processor plugins. This approach can save you both time and CPU resources instead of constantly reaching for all of those insert plugins. Alright, now with that intro aside, let's get right into showing you how to use the channel strip plugin inside Cubasis 3. Hello and welcome. We are wishing you the happiest of the happiest from Mobile Music Pro to wherever you are in the world. And we just wanted to quickly mention that most of the knowledge in today's video can be applied to pretty much any channel strip in any DAW. Now, Cubasis 3 by default actually places a studio EQ and a channel strip on every single track. And they do this because that is what is generally needed in most circumstances. Now, you can use the channel strip together with other plugins if you'd like, it's really up to you. But always remember to be mindful of your resources, especially on mobile devices like the iPhone and iPad, and using the channel strip can be a great way to do that. So let's go ahead and dive into the channel strip now. So what you're looking at here is a Cubasis 3 project with an 8-bar loop that we created earlier today. But what we're going to be focusing on right now is just this single drum loop down here. So we'll go ahead and solo this track. And now let's go ahead and bring up our channel strip plugin. As we mentioned before, the channel strip and studio EQ do come default on every single track. So to find those, we simply go over here to our left-hand menu and tap on Insert Effects. Now if this menu is minimized, you can make sure to maximize that again by tapping on the arrow. So let's expand our Insert Effects tab, and as you can see here is the Channel Strip plugin and the Studio EQ plugin. Now by default they are not engaged, as you can see they're grayed out here, but to enable them we simply have to turn on the Enable button on the far left hand side. And you can always disengage this at any time by tapping on that once more, but let's go ahead and leave this enabled for now. And now let's bring up our actual plugin by tapping on the E. And let's scroll down to our track here again, and here is the plugin, so let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger now. And again scroll down to our track, and of course you don't have to do that, I just like seeing the track in view here. Now let's go over all of these individual components and controls in this plugin. And we're going to go starting from the left to the right here. And on the far left hand side here we have our first plugin, which is labeled Cut Filter, which is basically just an EQ or an equalizer. You'll notice that each one of these controls, including the equalizer here, the cut filter, noise gate, compressor, and saturator, all have a bypass button on the top right hand corner. When the bypass button is enabled and the red light is on, the plugin itself will be completely bypassed. And this is often used so you can A/B your sound and see exactly what you're modifying. And as you can see here we have our low cut filter and our high cut filter, very much like a standard EQ. You can begin to cut all of your low frequencies by adjusting this knob here and dragging it up. And vice versa, you can begin to cut off all your high frequencies by dragging this knob here and moving it more to the left. And remember what we said before about the channel strip is that it is essentially a plugin full of plugins. And having this EQ filter here built into this plugin will definitely save us resources by using this EQ as opposed to stacking an additional EQ on top of this. And to the right of our EQ we have our noise gate processor. Now this is pretty much used mostly for drums and vocals, but you can put a noise gate on pretty much any sound that you want. The noise gate acts a little bit like a compressor and will start to engage once a certain threshold level has been met. And you can adjust that right here with this knob labeled threshold. Now to the right of our noise gate processor, we have our compressor. And if you are curious how compressors and EQs actually work, you can check out the other couple of videos in this series that focus on both the EQ and the compressor. So we have all of our standard controls that a compressor has, including the ratio, threshold, attack, and release. And we even have a makeup gain down here that is most often set to the auto function here. As you can see right here, we can enable and disable this by tapping on the auto. This certainly comes in handy for new producers that don't want to mess with that particular function. For example, there is no auto gain option in the standard Cubasis compressor. You actually have to modify that yourself. So this is a really cool and handy feature to have. Now finally, to the right of our compressor, we have our saturator plugin. Now this effect can be used on pretty much any sound. What it's typically used for is to add warmth and texture and a little bit of extra dirtiness to your sound. You can see we have a couple of options here for our saturator engine. The first is the tape option on the left-hand side, and then to the right of that we have our tube option. Now these are mutually exclusive, so you can only select one at a time. And really they both sound really good. Now to enable the saturator and begin adding saturation, we will begin turning up the drive with this knob here. Now once this drive knob is set all the way to 0, there is 0 saturation being applied to the signal even if it is enabled. You do actually have to use this drive knob to begin adding saturation to your sound. And you can decide exactly where you'd like to apply that saturation with these EQ knobs below the drive knob. If you'd like to apply the saturation more on the low end, you can simply up this EQ low knob here, or vice versa. If you'd like to apply more saturation in the high end, you can increase this knob over here on the right hand side. Now there is one more very important knob on this saturator plugin, and I'm still not actually sure why Steinberg decided to put it on the saturator plugin, but I suppose it still works plenty fine here. And what we're talking about is the gain knob here at the bottom of the plugin. This gain knob here is a very important component because we use this knob for a technique called gain staging, and we actually have a video on that on the channel, but we'll briefly remind you what that is here. And basically gain staging is simply adjusting the level of your signal before it hits the fader. And we do this for several reasons, but the main reason is to have more fidelity in your volume faders on your mixer. So let's just show you that real quick right now. So if we bring up our mixer, and we make this nice and big by dragging this all the way to the top. And let's go ahead and click on the XL so we can expose additional parameters here in this mixer, namely the dB numbers here on the left-hand side. You'll notice that if we move the fader from 0 to 5, it's not that much space, just a little bit of space here, from 0 to 5. But if we move this down here, you can see that if we moved it that same amount that we did from 0 to 5 down here, we actually go from 60 to 80. Now that's a pretty big adjustment of 20 dB compared to the 5 dB when the volume fader is more close to 0. So let's double tap the fader to reset this to 0. And what you'll notice on our mixer here for this loop is that all of our faders are set to 0. And again, that's because all of these tracks are properly gain staged before they hit the fader, so that we really don't have to actually worry about the faders too much. Until the final mix, that is, of course. But for now, we're simply adjusting the volume of each one of these tracks through that gain knob on the channel strip. So let's minimize this and go back to our channel strip. So we'll tap on our track and then tap on our channel strip. And just like the rest of Cubasis plugins, if we tap on our channel strip under internal effects and tap on factory presets, we'll find a ton of professional industry standard presets in here to get you started. It doesn't matter if you're a novice or a professional producer, these are great starting places for you to begin adjusting your sound. And they also serve as great learning tools so that you can A/B the different presets and see the differences. Now really quickly before we get into this loop, let's just play a little bit with this channel strip. So we have our drum loop here, and what we're going to do first is play with the EQ. So let's go ahead and cut out some of these lows and then cut out some of these highs. Put on our headphones real quick. Alright, so as you can hear, just a pretty standard EQ there, allowing you to cut the lows or the highs. Now let's play with the compressor. Alright, so pretty standard compressor there. You can add a little bit of compression, or of course, you can completely smash your sound. So let's reset this to the default preset real quick. And finally, let's play with the saturator. Alright, very cool. As you can see there, you can play with tape or tube saturation, and it will add a little bit of extra dirtiness and a little bit of extra distortion. And now what I want to do is show you guys this loop and how we use the channel strip on each one of these tracks. So real quick, you can see we just have a few tracks here. We have our drum loop track, our bass track, our pad track, our keys track, and finally our arpeggio track. Now all of these sounds here is actually coming from our brand new sample pack, which you can download for free right now at mobilemusicpro.com. We have our drum loop coming from that sample pack, which is the Essentials Pack 1, and then we have the bass in the form of MIDI coming from our sample pack, but that MIDI is being played by Jacob Hack's brand new app, the Agonizer, which is a fantastic bass synth. Below that we have our pad track. This audio again is coming directly from our sample pack. Below that we have our keys track, and the MIDI here is again coming from our sample pack, but being played by Korg Module. Here we are using the Boomy Vibe EP preset. And finally we have our arpeggio track here being played by Synthmaster 1. The MIDI here was created by copying the MIDI from our keys track and then just leaving mostly the bass notes. So that's about it, 5 simple tracks. So we'll go ahead and play this loop for you now and then check out those individual channel strips. Now let's check out our channel strip settings on these individual tracks. So first up is our drum loop track. So we'll tap on our insert effects and then tap on our channel strip. So let's see what preset we started out with here. We'll tap on channel strip and then tap on factory presets. So it looks like we did just use our default preset here, but I believe we increased the drive and increased the gain. I also ended up cutting a little bit of the highs over here in our cut filter. I also increased the threshold in the compressor just a little bit, so that this can grab a little bit more of the signal. You'll notice that the noise gate will be pretty much bypassed on every single one of our tracks, as I don't often use that particular tool. We'll start out with the plugin disengaged, and then we'll engage it halfway through. So again, you can hear there how I compressed that signal and removed some of those highs. And again, this is all using one single plugin, the channel strip. I didn't have to add additional EQs or additional compressors. So let's move on to our next track, the Agonizer track. The MIDI here and the bass track, once again, coming from our brand new sample pack, Essentials Pack 1, available at mobilemusicpro.com. So let's bring up our channel strip by tapping on the E. So let's check which preset we started out with here by tapping on channel strip and tapping on factory presets. So it looks like here we started out with the Synth Bass 1 preset. I then used the EQ to cut some of the lows and cut a bunch of the highs off, because I did want to make room a little bit for our kick drum, and cut off a bunch of the highs to make room for the rest of the tracks, such as the pad and the keys. And as usual, our noise gate here is bypassed. I didn't do much of the compressor, I believe I left those settings the same, but I did add some more saturation. And of course, this track, like the rest of the tracks, is gain staged here by using this gain knob at the bottom. Alright, once again, definitely compressing that signal as you can hear and cutting off a bunch of the highs. You can really hear that saturator distortion in there as well. Alright, let's move on to the pad track here. Tap on our pad track and bring up our channel strip by tapping on the E. Let's see what preset we used here. We'll tap on channel strip and factory presets. Here we used the Synth Pad 1 preset. Here I ended up again modifying the cut filter by cutting off a bunch of the lows and a bunch of the highs, effectively trying to make this particular track sit more in the middle, without a lot of lows and without a lot of highs. And once again, we are compressing this signal with our threshold set to negative 37 dB, so compressing quite a bit of the signal there. And then we have our tape saturator, but we're just barely touching that, applying about 1.8 dB of saturation, so not a lot there. Alright, so once again, making that a little bit quieter by removing both the lows and the highs, trying to make that track sit a little bit more in the middle. Alright, let's move on to the next track. We have our keys track coming up, so we'll tap on our keys, and then tap on the channel strip. Let's see which preset we used. We'll tap on channel strip and factory presets. Alright, looks like we started out with the Rhodes 1 preset. So we're cutting some of the highs here, cutting some of the lows, got our compressor going, and adding a little bit of saturation, actually a little bit more than the previous track here. We're adding about 4.1 dB of saturation. And of course we have this gain knob, gain staging our track. So let's quickly A/B this track now. So definitely compressing that track there, making it a little bit louder, and cutting off a bunch of the highs. And now onto our final track, the Synthmaster 1 Arpeggio. We'll tap on that, and then tap on the channel strip. Now as you can see, we do have one additional plugin here, which is the wider plugin, which will allow that to sit more towards the edge of the stereo field, kind of making it sound like a little bit more like it's in the background. So for this track, I believe we just used the default preset again. What we've done here is we've actually cut a bunch of the lows, and cut some of the highs as well. And we still have our compressor enabled here, not quite compressing as much as the last track, but still a little bit here with negative 20 dB in the threshold and a 2:1 ratio. So for every 1 dB, we are reducing that volume by 2 dB. Now we have our saturator on here, but as you can see, the drive is set to 0, so that means that there is no saturation being applied to the signal. So this channel strip is being used just like the previous tracks here, pretty much, where we start with our filter, removing any frequencies that we don't need. Then we move on to our compressor, seeing if we need to compress that signal or not, maybe make it a little bit louder and a little bit more even. And then finally we move on to the saturator and the gain knob. If there's no saturation needed, then you just focus on the gain knob, getting that volume level just right. And we'll A/B this real quick for you. Alright, so a pretty big difference there. You can definitely see how we're trying to remove those frequencies and definitely reduce the gain a lot to make it more quieter, so that it really can sort of sit in the background there. Now what I want to do is quickly A/B this loop for you, both with the channel strips enabled and disabled. So let's do that now. We'll first play it really quick with all of the channel strips enabled. Now, as you heard, there were some pretty drastic changes when we were going through the different tracks, so this should be a pretty big difference between the loop with the channel strip and without the channel strips. So let's disable those now. Alright, we have disabled all those channel strips for our 5 tracks, so let's hear what the loop sounds like now. So, as you can hear there, one pretty big mess. Everything is fighting for frequencies, nothing is essentially EQ'd or compressed, so some things are too loud and other things are too quiet, basically just kinda one big mess. So let's hear what this sounds like one more time with all the channel strips enabled. Alright, we've once again enabled all of our channel strips with those EQ and compressor processing modules on board, so let's hear what that sounds like. Alright, a pretty big difference there. As you can hear, everything is properly EQ'd now, compressed, and sitting in the right frequency range. So as you can see and hear, hopefully, you can really get most of your grunt work done with these channel strip plugins before the need to add a bunch of different inserts like additional EQs and additional compressors. And most channel strips even have saturation processing on board. Not using all those extra plugins can really save you a ton of resources, especially when you're working with mobile devices like the iPad or iPhone. So a pretty standard channel strip plugin there, really not too complex, and of course since it's Steinberg, it will come with a ton of professional grade presets. Alright, if you are still rocking with us, we can't thank you enough for being here. And we especially can't thank the people enough that always show up for our live premieres every Wednesday and Saturday mornings. Now we do hope that this video has cleared up any confusion you had around what a channel strip is and what it's actually used for. As we previously stated, channel strip plugins are used by a lot of industry professionals, and for good reason. And we hope that some of the examples given in this video can help outline some of those main reasons. But as usual, it will always come down to your personal workflow and what you think sounds good. There really is quite a variety of different channel strip plugins out there, each with their own unique quirks and sounds. So you will likely want to experiment at some point in your musical career so you can kind of see what sounds best for you. And just a final reminder, guys, that our latest contest is ending tonight at 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So do make sure to go to mobilemusicpro.com/contest and get those submissions in as soon as possible. And we'll be revealing the winners during our live stream next Wednesday, December 2nd at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll also be listening to a few different entries during today's live stream, so make sure to join us live in just a couple hours. And of course, don't forget about our recently launched Discord chat where the conversation can go on long after our live streams and live premieres have ended. And we've always got more content and more tools coming for mobile music producers, so to stay up to date with everything that we're doing, make sure to check out mobilemusicpro.com and sign up for our free mailing list. And if you are enjoying this content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. So until next time, everybody, keep talking music, and we'll see you later. And if you're new to the channel, what we do here is create weekly videos to try to teach people And the third video in that series will be today's video covering the And the third video in that series will be today's video where we cover come on. And that's because they